Murder. 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 That's the name of the planet inhabited by the vile Megarachnids, which sound like they could be homies, cousins, relatives of the Tyranids. I'm still not super sure that I'm clear on what the relationship there is or if there is one. Anyways, if you have any ideas or speculation, let me know in the comments. Anyways, the story goes that this planet of murder was set up as a prison world for the Megarachnids by the Interrex until they were discovered by an expeditionary fleet of Blood Angels who decided to go in and see what was going on there. And things did not go so well for them. During the landing attempt, their shuttles were scattered, their communications were disrupted, and they were quickly overrun by gross alien bug things. Now, they did manage to get a distress call out, which was picked up by the Emperor's children, who decided to go in for a good old-fashioned rescue mission. Although things didn't go so great for them either, and most of the Horus Heresy story centers around them and their struggles in this harsh environment trying to fight the Megarachnids. Until, of course, the War Master Horus himself sends in his own company of Luna Wolves that make quick work of these Megarachnids, and they proceed to murder. I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to do this concept with the Luna Wolves. Now, let me preface this by saying it's not my goal to make this 100% lore accurate. I'm just trying to capture the feeling of the planet's surface. Now, the planet was described as having these forests of giant grass stalks which resembled trees. And these trees had a lot of sharp branches on them that had impaled bodies. Now, I wasn't gonna go all the way that gruesome for it, but was thinking about how to build this. The first thing that came to mind was bamboo. I thought the long stalks really resembled these giant grass stalks. The foliage would give me an opportunity to do some of those bright, bloody reds. So I thought it would come together all quite nicely. We got some bamboo bushes, we got some bamboo trees, we even got these little horsetail grass tufts, which I thought complemented them perfectly. And of course, we'll throw in some skulls for good measure. All right, let's see how we build this. All right, we're gonna kick things off with a beautiful 32mm base, so full of potential, and then we're gonna start putting down some magic sculpt putty to build up our landscape, and I'm going to slope it a little bit towards the back because I'm gonna anchor the model at the front of the base, which gives us plenty of room at the back for a big, beautiful bamboo tree, which we're also gonna surround with some of the bamboo bushes to almost create a wall behind this guy. Then I'm gonna add some skulls because this is murder after all. And finally, some horsetail grass tufts, which I'll put on the side and in the foreground. All right, we're looking pretty good so far. I also added a small hoodoo rock to the foreground there, and now I'm just gonna be applying some texture paint. And I'm using Arid Dry Ground by Mig in this case, which is a fairly coarse texture, which is gonna be really nice for a rough ground look if I can just focus on applying it carefully. There we go. Our stage is set. When thinking about how I would paint these, I wanted to create a bit of contrast between the model and the basing environment to really amplify the murderous redness of those bases. Now, given that the Luna Wolf scheme is pretty much all white, I decided to go for some cooler undertones in the armor to really help them leap off of those bases. Now, normally I would try and align the shadows of the model to the tone of the basing environment to help things feel more cohesive, and usually that creates a much stronger mood. But in this case, I wanted to treat them as independent entities, just in case, you know, they might want to travel or something. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves. Let's just get to painting. So let's have a look at the paints used in this project. So this was the lineup for the white armor, with Payne's Gray being the base mixed with graphite. This is the lineup of reds that I used for the foliage and ground. And then finally the blacks, rock gray, and some chrome for the metallics. So overall, not a huge range of paints, just focusing on the very simple contrast of that cool white with the vibrant reds. And here we're starting off our airbrushing just by giving it a nice coat of gray primer for starters. And then I slowly started to highlight it up with lighter and lighter grays. So basically right now I'm focusing on the colors that I want on the Marine. It's gonna save me the most time in painting that armor. And then finally, I'm just gonna be adding a highlight layer of white. And now I'm gonna have to reset the undertones for the base because I want them to be warm, not cool like the Marines. And if you're wondering how I'm getting them on and off, yes, the feet are magnetized. Why? Maybe because I'm crazy, or maybe I got something else up my sleeve. We'll just have to wait to find out. Anyways, here I'm spraying on the rock gray as a highlight to the burnt sienna that I applied before. And then I'm going to be going in with some Vallejo Express color. This is the mahogany, which I thought would give me some nice definition here. And it did, but it was a little bit too much. It just ended up drying as too much of a dark brown, so I went in with the airbrush again, spraying some rock gray to highlight it back up, and I do like the effect that this gave me on those bamboo stalks, so it all kind of worked out. Now getting back to the ground, I did want it to feel a little bit more red, so I'm going in with burnt sienna again, just with a wash, and then I'm going to start hitting some of the foliage with Seraph Red, which is the Vallejo Express color, and then highlighting them up with some lighter reds, just picking out those leaves very carefully. You really need to make sure that you're using a very saturated red. If you have too much white in it, it's just going to end up looking pink. But you can take something like Pyrrole Red and glaze it over after if you want to bring the intensity back. Now for the taller bamboo trees, I recommend doing an airbrush layer on these just to cover that foliage a lot more quickly. It's going to save you time from picking them all out by hand since you got to go and highlight them a little bit anyways. Then I'm just taking some rock gray and picking out the details on the bamboo stalks and also just trying to blend in a little bit of that airbrush overspray from the red. Then taking that same rock gray and highlighting up the skulls. So you can see I'm really reusing a lot of the colors on different parts of the base here. And then taking some of that bright Pyrrole Red and letting it bleed into the ground near the foliage just to simulate some undergrowth and get more of that red color into the base. And I think these feel pretty vibrant, much better than that brown direction I was going in previously. All right, now for the marine, let's get into painting the armor. Again, starting with Payne's Gray and Graphite mix, highlighted up with white. And yes, technically we've already applied this with the airbrush, but I like to do a brush pass on this just to clean things up and give it more of the hand painted effect. So here I'm just applying the shadow color and then wet blending it into the mid-tone and finally into the highlight. And again, this process will help the armor look a lot more smooth, and it just gives you more control over exactly where you want to place those highlights and shadows. All right, now for some of the black details, I end up using the greasy black Vallejo Express paint, and I put this onto the guns and some of the chest details as well as the ribbing on the marine. Although in some of the brighter areas, I felt I needed 2 coats just to get that dark coverage. Then I used the Seraph Red Express paint to just cover some of the red details, and then Pyrrole Red for the bright eye lenses, which I was going to highlight up with some white and just putting on some nice little reflection points there. I used the Mahogany Express paint for the leather details on the gun. And then I used my shadow color from the white as my highlights on the black just to keep everything tied together. Followed up with some Vallejo Air Chrome to pick out the metallics on the bayonet and some of the crest details. And then it was time to start painting the cape, and for this I'm using the Vallejo Game Color Black, which is a very matte black, and I'm just applying it as a wash over the whole thing. And you can see I'm leaving a lot of imperfections there. I thought this would help add to the tattered feeling of the cloak, and now I'm just going in and refining some of the highlights and shadows. And I'm basically using the same wet blending technique that I did on the armor. I also added a slight textural effect to the ripped edges of the cloak and some of the tears throughout the middle. And overall, I thought the white armor was looking a little bit too plain, so I decided to add some battle damage, starting with some chipping with a dark brown color, and then taking my white highlight and just picking out the edges underneath each of those chips, which just helps to sell their 3-dimensionality. Then for the final step on the armor, I just took some of the mahogany and I created some blotches and some dirt stains around the feet just to make it look like they've been trekking through that environment. And time for one more side quest, which is going to be doing some freehand on the shoulder pads. And I saw a couple different versions of the symbol for the Luna Wolves, but I chose to do the crescent moon underneath the wolf head. And these guys really needed something on these shoulder pads because I hadn't seen any iterations of these guys done in the MK6 armor, and usually they have the trim to kind of balance things out, but without that trim they feel kind of naked, so we had to put something in there just to take up some space. I think this worked out pretty well just to balance out that otherwise monotonous armor. And I am absolutely loving the contrast between that cool white and the vibrant reds of the base. All right, there you have it. The first installment of the Horus Heresy World Tour is complete, and I'm pretty stoked about how these turned out. I mean, they feel violent, they feel aggressive, they feel like pretty much exactly what you'd expect from the War Master's own Legion. Now I gotta figure out which Legion I'm gonna do next, and I wanna keep things fairly chronological to the flow of the Horus Heresy series, but I don't mind jumping around a bit. So if you have any ideas for Legions that you would like to see paired with any particular planet or environment, let me know in the comments. Please also remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you like this type of content to keep up with this project, to get other useful hobby tips and techniques, and also just to help us grow. All right, until next time, my friends, go make it epic.